I am absolutely thrilled to be here with Dr. John Paul Johnson, tremendous choral conductor extraordinaire. I want to give him a very brief introduction here. Dr. Johnson has been a professor at Texas State University, Wichita State University, and the University of Kansas. Dr. Johnson's choirs have sung throughout the United States and Europe, on national television and public radio, and at national and regional music conferences. Dr. Johnson served as a conductor in residence at the Chopin Academy of Music in Warsaw and Trinity College of Music in London. And by the way, there's actually a hymn that's named after that, and we do that hymn all the time. So he also served at Trinity College of Music in London. He's been guest conductor, clinician, and adjudicator of more than 700 festivals. So not one, not
Good.
two, not 20, not 100, but it says 700 festivals and workshops worldwide, and is a frequent guest conductor at Carnegie Hall in New York City. So I'm thrilled to be here. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Johnson about 20 years ago when he was running the choral program at University of Kansas. And it's great to talk to you again.
Jeff, thank you so much for including me in this. It's great to reconnect. We've talked, but we haven't seen each other in 20 years. So this is great.
Exactly, exactly. Well, let's get into this. So, my father was an attorney. He was the head of a law firm for 45 years. And one of the books that he had was written by a famous judge. And in this book that's supposed to be super technical, super high level, the judge is telling attorneys basic stuff like, look the judge in the eye, be prepared, super, super basic stuff. And so what I wanted to begin by asking you, Dr. Johnson, is when you see high school choirs, college choirs, whatever the case may be, what are some of the things that you see that you're kind of shocked by or appalled by, or that you say that should be fixed?
That's a really good question. I have to lead into it a little bit. I was one of the very lucky people who got to study with Robert Fountain, and he was director of choral activities at the University of Wisconsin. And every Friday, the grad students and Mr. Fountain would have breakfast together. And there was one time when we were talking about issues with choirs, and he said, there's no such thing as a bad choir. It's only bad choral directors. And we all laughed. And then he said, no, think about it. A good choral director will understand how to work with the voice, how to choose music, how to work with individuals as individuals. And it kept going on down through the list. So typically the things that I have the opportunity to see, when I often get invited in to work with choirs before they go to contest. And in my head, I have this checklist going down through thinking of all the areas that they're going to get judged in. There's nine areas. First is what are the students looking like as they sing? Are they engaged? Are they showing good technique, et cetera, et cetera? Vocal tone. Do they understand how to achieve good vocal tone, to lift the soft palate and to get that sound that resonates? Breathing techniques, intonation, lack of understanding of what the music is trying to convey. And that I think is such a great synopsis of what I see. Now, when I'm working with the choirs, I will never say to them, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. I usually say something like, where two or more choral directors are together, there's going to be differing points of view as to how you work in these issues. So be open and try the things that I'm going to ask you to try. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
It does, but I just wonder, like, let me give you an example. I was observing, I was working on a graduate studies, and we had to go observe all these different high schools in Corpus Christi. And there was one where the guy had a real nice voice, real nice guy, well dressed, and he stood up on a platform in front, and all the students were like all throughout the auditorium. Some of them were, a football field away from him, and he just kind of sang through stuff, and some of them were looking at him, some of them were not. And I was just thinking to myself, like, this is totally wrong. I wanted to get in there and like engage. I mean, if you saw that, I mean, I would assume, again, I don't know this,
no, I agree with
you
you.
have to engage all the students. You can't just let some of them sit in the back of the in the back. I mean, I remember when you were there at KU, you would, you'd say you were working on something, and you'd say, don't make me come up into there and see who's not
Yeah,
saying it
yeah,
correctly.
yeah,
We were
exactly.
scared. We were scared.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. So much of the time with choral directors, you can see just by observing them, their their inflated egos, oftentimes, their lack of knowledge, um, and not just knowledge, but how to work effectively within a rehearsal. Um, it's a bit like putting together, like let's say that you want to cook a great dinner for your family, and you decide that you're going to make homemade chicken fettuccine alfredo. Okay. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to have a recipe that you're going to follow, and you follow it step by step. And all too often, choral directors don't understand that there is a process that they need to work through to have effective rehearsals. And secondly, to be prepared to walk into that rehearsal. Now, granted, oftentimes if you've written stuff down, you're going to vary from that written rehearsal plan, but um, you have thought through all of the issues, and okay, here's 3 ways that I can try to correct that. Or, gosh, look at this. Here's a line here in the bass part, and the basses aren't realizing that they're actually singing what the alto sang on the previous page. Drawing those inferences. It I'm really sorry on one hand, I'm sorry that you experienced that when you went into that high school. On the other hand, I'm glad you did, because it made you think and realize this is not very effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and all the questions I have written down here, hopefully they're not asking the same thing, but I want to jump to one of them here.
Okay.
They're all basically about how do you stand in front of real people, real singers, and live to tell the tale, basically.
Oh,
Because it's
that's
it's
good.
one thing for people to go into a practice room and look at music and how it's and have ideas about such and such. But man, when you get into especially in church work, as this is, I know that you did mostly universities and so forth and so on. But
Well, I've actually, I taught for 43 years. I've done church music for 50.
oh, okay, yeah.
So from the time I was a freshman in college, I've always had a church choir. Always. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the next question, even though this wasn't the next one on the list, I'm going to hop around. When it comes to recruiting members, um, how much of that is what you know about music and theory and all that, and how much of it is your personality and your excitement level?
Well, you know me. You know I can be pretty overwhelming. I can tend to be bigger than life, and in a church, that's a real concern. It really does go back to the choral director has to have a good understanding of themselves. Are you the kind of person that people want to work with? Not that you have to be bigger than life or anything like that, but that you are knowledgeable, that you're caring. church choirs are very different in that they're a church within a church.
Mm.
You know, when choir members are there, how's your husband doing? How was the treatment this week for his cancer? Having a time of prayer together um, to be concerned about the soul of the choir and the soul of each of us. So, boy, I could talk on that subject for a long, long time, but I think congregation members, people quickly sense whether you are a wrangler, a cowboy, trying to just pull in people, or if it's, look, we're doing something special here. There's a real great ministry here. And I
Well,
wish you'd be.
what you've been describing, I don't know if this is the right word or not. It sounds like you're almost giving like a holistic program.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Very
I mean,
different from, you know, planning
yeah.
your rehearsal, 15 minutes before. Okay, what you're
If you were to see my grid, my plan
Mhm.
that I work from, it's spiritual needs. Okay, what do I need to share with them about this particular piece of music? Where are we heading vocally? What warm-ups am I going to do? What am I? You know Topeka better than anybody I know. And Topekans tend to sing with a sound. And to get them to open up, it's just like, no, 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 no. And I make some
You have
sort
to
of joke.
understand both my parents are from Chicago too, so
Oh, mercy. Okay, golly. So I try to keep building their music reading skills. Um, when I first started there, it was mostly rote, you know, listen, here it is. And now it's pretty much okay, here's an anthem. And turning to the accompanist, would you play open score? Would you play our parts along with us? Come on, gang, let's give it a try. Let's give it the old college try. And that gives me a sense of, okay, what do I need to go back in and work on? Hey, there are times where they just fall apart and start laughing. Yeah.
well, it
So,
sounds like I was glad to hear because obviously, I mean, my training was first on piano scholarship and then music theory, and over the years getting into it more and more. So I feel deficient in a lot of ways. But can I tell you, Dr. Johnson, one thing that I can do, I would feel better or at least as good as anybody in the world. I can look at a piece and I automatically know what parts the choir is going to miss.
that is a gift. That is truly a gift. But you've worked many, many years to be able to do that. You know, you have. I contend, well, one of the best choral directors I've ever known in my life was the most horrible singer I have ever known. Now, I'm not going to name, but I so much wanted to be his assistant.
Uh-huh.
And I applied to that university, got the job a year later, but he ended up going to a major university. And he'll be the first to say, I don't sing, but I'm a good voice technician. And he is. I mean, he knows how he knows how through words to get people to to improve. Going back to that teacher that you were talking about, Corpus Christi, I wonder if that teacher would feel comfortable talking if he was told he could not sing in a rehearsal. How would he run that rehearsal?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of
yeah,
course, this is a digression, but one of the best things that ever happened to us, I remember when you were in charge of KU, you were doing different construction programs and remember all that. So
yeah.
for one time, our particular choir, because there were a billion choirs there, we didn't have a place to rehearse, so we had to go sing in the hall for all of our rehearsals. That was the best
Yes,
thing that ever happened to us because there was no piano.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
I
It,
mean,
it
yeah,
it makes a wonderful difference. And in Texas, you were there for years, and everybody goes to contest,
yeah.
and there is that 6 minutes where you go into a room and your students and you are handed a piece of music you have never seen before. and you have 6 minutes without singing, where the students have to audiate. They have to work it through on their do, so, their solfege, and then to be able to sing it perfectly to get a 1. It's daunting. And especially when you stop to think the biggest high schools, like when I taught in Texas, I taught at a high school, they had close to 4,000 students. And the students in the choral program at that level of school, at a 6A school, were expected to sight read perfectly in movable do in all major and minor keys.
Wow.
Can you think of very many undergrads who could do that? No.
I
No.
saw some of the programs that I observed, they would be over in their groups doing these hand symbols and saying, but they didn't have any meaning. In other words, they might as
Right.
well sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do on the same. You know,
Yeah.
they could tell what syllable they're supposed to be, but there was no pitch relationship to that. Yeah.
You were one of the few people that I knew who had really great sight reading skills. And the reason why was your dedication to Gregorian chant.
Yeah.
You, to this day, I don't know anybody who sings chant or has as much knowledge as you when it comes to chant. You're,
Well,
you're, you're really good at it.
well, thank you. There's something
You're welcome.
you touch. It seems to me we have to be careful because we don't want to spend 6 hours talking about everything, but you were talking about a conductor that couldn't sing, but was in your eyes, a great conductor, right? A great
Yes.
choral conductor. And it's just interesting to me. Musicians seem to be such varied people. In LA, for example, there was a guy named Stevenson. I believe his name was Robert Merle Stevenson. He was a musicologist. Unbelievable, unthinkable genius. I mean, this guy was out. This guy was among the top three
Yeah.
musicologists of
Yeah.
all time. Have you ever heard of that, Rob?
Yeah.
Steve,
I've heard of him. Yeah. I've never met him.
and one of the people that taught at KU had studied with him too. But at the same time, he was also very strange. He lived in a small little student house. He would never buy new shoes. When his shoes got old, he would just duct tape around them.
Ah,
So at the time, but I mean, this guy was incredible, incredible music. And it seems like there was just so many different types of musicians. My teacher, Alice Downs at KU, I don't know if you ever met her.
yes.
He always had the reputation about her was, oh, she's an accompanist, she plays chamber music. She's not a real artist. Dr.
Ah,
Johnson, she played everything. She played the Brahms Paganini variation. She played all the ballades, all the etudes. And I'm just thinking, like, because she was very humble, I think, and perhaps not self-assured, but I could not believe the amount of solo repertoire that she played. I mean, both books of the Brahms variations, just, down the list. And so it seems like everybody has their own hang-ups and strengths and, you know.
yeah.
And what I want to ask you about, this was not on the list, but you've done all these performances at Carnegie Hall and all these other places. You must have an ability to deal with stress.
I got to tell you a story, and this will tell you. My first time at Carnegie Hall, it was the 100th it was the centennial celebration of Texas State University, and so 250 singers went with me there. We commissioned a work, and then we did the Norman Delajoy Osama David, 3 movement, just gut-wrenchingly difficult but fun, and the students loved it. So we had 2 full rehearsals in New York with our accompanist, who was the associate director of choral activities, and me. And then on Saturday night before the Sunday performance, I got to work with the orchestra. Gave the downbeat. It was in the wrong key. And I kept conducting, and there were issues. And I stopped and I looked at the concert master and I said, what does your piece of music say at the top? And she said, Psalm by Norman Delajoy for orchestra. I said, does it say for orchestra and choir? And she said, no. And so I looked at the orchestra and I said, I hate to tell you this, you've got the wrong scores.
Wow. I would have
And I,
I would have just died.
well, I luckily, my friend who was conducting after me with University of Washington, I looked at Greg and I said, I'm going to give you an extra half hour of rehearsal. So you'll have an hour and 15 minutes with the orchestra. But I said, I need to figure out how I'm going to pull this together. So I thanked the orchestra. I walked outside of the rehearsal hall, leaned up against the wall, and sobbed. Just cried until I got it out of my system. And then I realized I'm holding the conductor score. This has all the orchestra parts. So the associate director of choral activities and two students and I stayed up all night, copied every page out of that score, cut and pasted to make the, yeah.
Serious?
Well, think about it. Every choir member spent $1,200 to go on that trip. 250 people. And the big thing wasn't Carnegie Hall per se, it was to sing with the orchestra.
Yeah.
So we finished at 5 a.m. I put a note under every student's every room, and I said, you need to know what happened. And I said, this is going to be a very difficult rehearsal. I need you to be the ultimate professionals that you can be. No talking on the risers. It was a rough rehearsal, and I won't go into all the details of it. Although I did say to them, every time it fell apart and it took forever to put it together, I said, tonight when we're all at the party together, you got to buy me a gin and tonic. Well, someone tracked how many times I said that, and there were 11 gin and tonics in front of me when I got to the party. But
Wow.
so the rehearsal broke. The orchestra and the choir did the European rhythmic applause. I go back to the hotel. One of my very, very dearest friends who taught in the neighboring school district, who was old enough to be my mom, came up for the concert. Had lunch with her. When I got back to Carnegie Hall and I went down the side street to go into the performers' entrance, all of the orchestra members, all 90 of them were out on the street, had their music under the windshield wiper blades of cars, and they were practicing the piece of music. It ended up being a far better performance than it deserved to be. It took me months to get over that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, but I think it was something I had to learn. I got so mad at one of my choirs one time, I threw a music stand through a wall in front of them. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we had cause to be afraid of you when you were threatening us to come up
No,
with advisors.
no, it was at that point that I realized, okay, I have a son.
Mhm.
That was my dad's behavior. And it was one of the things in knowing yourself as a teacher and a conductor. Okay, I need to figure out what it takes for me to diffuse. And I think it's going to be a very rare person out there who's in this field that's going to say, I'm great at what I do. There's always room for improvement. I mean, to this day, I'm retired from college. My piano is around the corner here. It is strewn with music I never got to analyze when I was, like right now, I'm working on Verdi Requiem. Am I ever going to conduct it? No, but I want to know more about it. I mean, I think, and I see that in you. Even people who are thrown in a situation where, okay, there's no one else to conduct this choir, and I have a little bit of musical ability. It's like it catches you with a hook, like, wow, I want to know more about this. I want to be better at it,
getting back to the stress level, because, I did that. I taught high school for 4 years, 3 years. We went to the state, but it wasn't the public state. It was the
It was
private.
private. Yeah.
And then my students won first place and so forth and so on. But just organizing them, making sure everybody gets on the bus, everybody has lunch, everybody has money to buy. That to me was so difficult. Now you said the first time you went, you had 250 students. You're probably thinking about the music itself, the intervals, the skips, the orchestra, the tuning, the hall, and then you get there and they don't even have the right music. I
Well,
mean, they
that
didn't,
was part of it.
you probably weren't prepared for that in college. They didn't tell you what to do in that
Oh,
situation.
no, 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 no. Oh, yeah. Yeah, how would they teach that? You're at the preeminent music hall in the United States. You're about to make your debut. Your choir's impeccably prepared. The orchestra is impeccably prepared, but on the wrong arrangement of the piece of music.
Wow.
Yeah, um it ended up being a great trip. And funny you should mention that. Every time I did a tour with a choir, not only did I give them a detailed itinerary, I tried to get coupons to great restaurants and stuff like that, and say, oh, you've got time, go do this, go do that. Um,
Let me say, my perception of you, and granted, I haven't seen you in 20 years, but my perception for you back then was that you were firm when you needed to be, but also friendly. So
I
I saw you one time come into the library. I was just studying in there, and there was some guy that had, real great singer, tall guy, thought a lot of himself and so forth and so on. I mean, he had a great voice. But man, you went after this guy. You said, "How come I haven't seen you in rehearsal in, 2 weeks?" I
I
mean, everybody
remember
in the
that.
library was, you know.
Boy, I remember that moment. Yeah, and there were
Are you
moments.
seriously remember that moment?
I
Wow.
do, I do, I
So it
do.
seems like you have to know when to be firm and when to be friendly, maybe. Is that
Yeah, yeah, very much. It's interesting. I told you about that.
did he show up? Did he show up to rehearsal after that?
I ended up dropping him from the group. Yeah,
At least you
it's
warned him.
like,
I mean, he can't say that he wasn't warned.
well, it's I eventually had to say to him, you know, I I have X number of students in there. If you think of it as a piano keyboard, every singer is three keys on the keyboard. When you're not there, I could likely be missing my A flat, my B flat, and my B. Now, how do I work around that? How do I work around that? And I turned it back to him, and he was like, "Well, I guess you don't." No, I can't. I you are my instrument. You the whole group together is my instrument. And you and I have discussed that frustration. I work music so far in advance with my church choir, a minimum of 6 weeks in advance, cantatas 4 months in advance. And the whole reason being they have lives. I get that. They may have to stay late at work, or their kids their kids have performances at school. I get that. But that doesn't give them an excuse not to be there on Sunday. No, it doesn't. And I really try to make sure everybody is comfortable with it. Yeah, comfortable with the music. That you're saying some really kind things about me, and I I try to live up to that. There are times I don't. Like, I remember my very first set of auditions at KU, and I don't know if you remember or not. And it's, oh,
Yes, tall guy.
yeah, just, oh, what a tenor, what a tenor. And I didn't know that at this point, but I had heard so much about him because his high school choral director was a friend of mine. And he came into my office and he said, "Doc, I can't be in choir this semester. With the degree that I'm working on, musical theater and opera, I have to take a semester of dance." And it happens at the same time. Embarrassingly, I chewed him out so badly that he just started crying. It's like, no teacher deserves to have the power to emotionally damage somebody. Now, as it ends up, Jen and I are great friends now. And how many times I've apologized for that. I apologized to my grad students when I left KU because there were some that came specifically to study with me. And same thing at Texas State. There's always a sense of, yes, we're having victories, but I'm letting somebody down. So I just think that that's part of the game. Yeah.
And I love, teaching people music and teaching people how to sight sing, but I just hate all the, excuse me, politics and
Yeah.
as a high school choral director, a lot of times you have to justify your existence to the principal. And I just do not deal with that
No.
well.
And fundraising. I was lucky that when I taught in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, my first 8 years of teaching,
Mhm.
the superintendent and the principal said, if we can't fund it, you're not doing it because we're not going to have fundraisers, period. So when my kids sang at state conventions, or when we took a tour to Williamsburg, I took 150 kids to Williamsburg, and we did an exchange with a high school. Um, I never had to sell chocolate. I never had to any of that stuff. Then when I got to Texas, oh please, it's like, really, really, and we're going to sell pecans. We're going to sell pecans. Just don't tell me we're going to sell mattresses. That was the one I refused to do. Yeah.
So you end up deciding whether you want to spend your time studying music or going out and selling more pecans. And sometimes selling more pecans actually means that you get to do more music, but I struggle with that. Yeah.
Well, can I tell you something that when you said earlier about the ability to know where the difficult passages are in a piece of music, and you can pick up the piece of music and you can see it, that comes from your years of teaching. People who have taught public or private school don't have the gift of score preparation. You know, you're so busy doing stuff that oftentimes you're lucky if you picked up the right music off of your desk to go into the rehearsal. And it's kind of like, okay, compute. Okay,
That, that
here are the
reminds me, that reminds me of Joseph Hoffman, when he would play concerts, he was a founder of the Curtis Institute. He would go out into the concert and look at the program right before so he would know what he was supposed to play.
I
He was
love
incredible,
I love that.
incredible pianist.
Yeah, yeah. It it,
Um,
it, it is it's a gift. People often look at musicians, conductors, as, oh my gosh, isn't that just the easiest thing in the world? You love music and you're just, and they have no idea all of the, it's worse than the Rubik's Cube, trying to bring everything together. Yeah.
well, and I don't want to make this all about me, but in terms of me knowing what part they're going to struggle with, I do get disappointed when I'm not able to fix it because uh, I'll go into it and I'll say we got to do this exercise, and I design a warm up so that it will hopefully
Yeah. Dovetail.
fix the problem. And even when I tell them what's going to happen and it still happens, that's what's frustrating to me.
Yeah.
I say this
Yeah.
is what we're going to miss today, and so, but I'll work at it. I'll work at it more. Just want to make sure we get through this question here.
Okay.
So if you had to encapsulate, well, let's do this one first. I'm reversing another
Okay.
question. Would you agree that a major problem of a lot of conductors, at least choral conductors, is they don't know whether it sounds good or not? They don't hear something and they can't immediately say the basses they're not even close to being on the right pitches. Or
Oh, you,
or the
you,
altos are so
yeah.
much louder than the sopranos, and so they don't even know what they're really after.
And you just said it right there. They don't know what they don't know. It's like, oh golly, when I've gotten involved with things down through the years, and when I first started them, I'm thinking, oh, I got this. And then all the mysteries start appearing. And it's kind of like, oh, oh. Yeah, I distinctly remember I thought I was a pretty good choral director. And in my second year of teaching, a college choir came over from what was then Glassboro State. It's now the Gross School, the Gross Gross School of Music. I forget which university. And their choir was magnificent. They sang for us, and we sang a Brahms piece for them. And the conductor came over. The choir was in front of me, so they were here, and he faced me and he said, do you realize you're accenting the last syllable of every phrase? Do you realize that? No. He said, conduct it again and watch what you're doing in your gesture. And I got through one phrase and my jaw just dropped. And I looked at him and said, I had no idea. And he said, yeah, this is part of the big problem. If we don't have some sort of way to reflect, either recording the rehearsal or having someone we trust come in and listen or whatever. And that's a blessing about most churches because the services are recorded. And to go back and
Most people are not willing to listen to what they do, though.
right.
They don't
Right.
want to hear it. They don't want to hear. It's hard. It's
Well, it's like
tough.
I preached a couple of weeks ago. I hate my speaking voice. It is like fingernails on a chalkboard for me. But I knew that I would probably get the opportunity to do it again and I'd learn from it. So yeah, I did listen to it. But I don't have that sense of frustration with choirs that I work with. I really want to hear
Well,
what they're doing.
I didn't just mean choirs. I mean pianists, anybody. I mean, Arthur Rubinstein used to talk about when he'd hear his playbacks, he'd say, now I'm going to take my lesson.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun to hear the that when they first figured out how to record 1876 or something, 1880, there was a piano teacher that recorded himself playing, and he said, is that really me? He said, am I doing things that I've told my students not to do for 60 years? So, I mean, but that for me has been painful, but a really good way for me to improve is listening to
Absolutely.
what everyone else has to listen to.
I, I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's the absolute truth. Yeah.
I mean, but what would you say if you had to diagnose, and I don't know whether you can or not, but people who don't know, they don't even know what sounds good. So how are they supposed to learn
Well,
that? How do you learn that? I mean,
that's a good question, and I can address that pretty easily. When you're listening to your choir, when you're listening to a recording, do you hear one sound, a blended sound, or do you hear all the individuals? Because if you're hearing all the individuals, the vowels are not lined up. It's I love it. I have a couple of people in my choir that when I say this, they do this,
mm-hmm.
and they can't hear the difference. And I'm not physically going to go over and yank their jaw down. What I'm planning on doing, I have a wax pair that I bought in Singapore years ago when I was over there, to demonstrate. Okay, so you have the space not here, but in the back. So that's the first thing. Secondly, then listen for incorrect notes. Okay, let's say you've gotten through the correct notes. Okay, how is the balance? When you're listening, do you hear all parts equally? No, sometimes they're not supposed to be. And then lastly, what's it doing for you musically? Are you convinced of the story or whatever is in the piece of music. And how do you get connecting to connect the line, the rise and the fall of the line? Those are the four main things right there. And oftentimes when I go out and I do these clinics, I have kids reflect, okay, so let's look at the four things. They'll be in a circle in the room. Do you hear individual voices? Yes. Without pinpointing, where do you hear them? Well, I hear it in the basses, or I hear it in the altos, or whatever. Well, now how about the tone? And going through it that way. Everybody can learn. Not everybody can do it, but
it took me 4 years to finally understand, to be able to hear the lifted soft palate. And I remember it would drive us nuts because Dr. Dougherty he would stop the choir after 3 notes. He didn't even care if they knew the notes. All he wanted to hear was the right sound. And now I've become that same person.
Well, I think it's so funny. He had that very strong Appalachian Mountain accent, and yet he was brilliant at being able to hear what was going on within the choir. Just brilliant. Yeah.
Let me ask you this though. You say that when the vowels don't match, but what about like a piece like Mozart's Requiem where everybody is singing like a different word at the same time?
Well, it's a really good point. If everybody has that soft palate up, they're going to have the roundness, the shape in their vowel sound. So they may be all singing different words, different syllables, but they're still going to have that blend. It really does boil down to most terrible singing that I have heard. It's through this, instead of through this, with a soft palate up. And then when I say to them, when I speak to them, and I say, if you talk with your soft palate up, this is what it sounds like. So you can really save vocal miles by going through the text with a choir, saying the words with their soft palates up. All right, now sing it that way. Yeah.
I remember shortly before his death, I remember Roger Wagner said that he spent his entire life trying to teach singers how to talk.
Yes.
Made some sense. And of course, he preferred his name pronounced Roger Wagner because he was his dad was French, and he actually fought, I think, in the French army during one of the world wars. But I mean, I think most people call him Roger Wagner. But so the final thing is here. This is tough because you need everything. You need to be able to do everything. But at the same time, what are the skills that the choir director to survive in front of real people, real actual people who have, let's just say, a wide variety of skills?
Yeah.
What are those skills that you survive in, or that you need to survive, and how do you get them? Like, in other words, if I went to college right now and I had, I don't know, 2 years, what are the courses how do you get what
let me approach that in a different way. Most people who come out of an undergraduate program, when they get with their choir, they don't know literature. Okay. The literature that they know was generally sung by a really good choir at the university level. And their ego gets the best of them, like, well, I could teach that. I was guilty of that. My first concert, I don't even want to begin to think about it, but it was awful. I mean, the audience loved it. Their kids were up there singing. It was kind of like that. To me, it felt like it was the end of The Music Man when the band comes out and they've been told to, feel the music, and they start playing da di da di da di da di da, and no one's in tune. That's what I envisioned that concert was like. And my friend that I told you that came to Carnegie Hall, she and her husband kind of adopted my wife and I as their kids because their son was living in Michigan. And we went over for Christmas and we were playing cards, and Janet needed some help up in the kitchen. And she said, I'm taking you aside because you need to learn. She said, you need when you go into your first choir, listen to what you've got. Make as good of an appraisal as you can about, okay, what's their sound like? What's their blend like? What's their ranges like? I mean, God love my church choir. I have to trick them to sing above an F. Okay. Because if they see it, if they see a G, yeah, it, no joke. This is it. Oh, when they go up to it, their eyes roll on the whole bit. And so we'll warm up to a B flat. And it's kind of like, don't you pull that on me. You just sang up to B. You sang 3 notes higher than this. You know what to do. So literature. Yeah. One of the great beauties of our profession right now is that we've got J.W. Pepper online. And let's say that you've heard your choir and it's kind of like, I've got soprano, altos, and a couple of boys. Okay, so look at SAB music. Well, what level? Well, they give you 5 different levels of difficulty. Go listen to the easiest ones first. What do you think? Yeah, because in every concert, you better have some stuff that they can learn quickly so they feel successful that you can get to the meat.
And this is what that lady was telling you at the dinner?
Well, a lot of this I figured out on my own, but she was telling me, here is the issue. You're not shaping your music. And she was really great at that. Another thing, picking the right music, knowing how to plan your rehearsals. There, one of the things that I was guilty of in my undergraduate, I can't begin to tell you the number of classes that I skipped. I did. I failed a French class because I skipped more than half of the classes. And then when I went to teach,
I don't want to interrupt you, but come to think of it, there is no choral conductor degree in undergraduate, right? Or is there?
no, but I had a student who came over from Sweden to study with me at Texas State, and he didn't want to do music ed. And he is the one and only person in the United States with an undergraduate degree in choral conducting performance. Only one.
So there is no technical, but so what were you, when you say that you were skipping classes, what degree were you?
Oh, well, I was skipping my theory classes. That was the one that hurt me the most.
What degree were you pursuing though?
Music ed. Music ed.
Is that kind of like a conductor's
Yeah,
degree?
that's the union card. That really is the union card. And
You were saying that you were skipping a lot of classes, yeah.
but when I got to Texas State and then at KU and at Wichita State, I would say to the freshmen, because I would always get to talk to the freshman seminars. Let's say you go to a doctor and you've broken your elbow. And the doctor says, hey, you know what? I skipped the classes where we were taught how to do this, but I think I can do it. What are you going to do? Find another doctor. How about this? I skipped the classes where we learned about Beethoven or Mozart. Mozart's a better example. We learned about Mozart and his style of music, and I skipped most of my 3rd and 4th level of music theory. Do you think you're qualified to do the job? Go to class. Go to class. If you're going to skip something that has absolutely nothing to do with being a teacher, like statistics, like, English literature. Although I have to say, one of the best classes I ever had in my undergraduate was English literature. The professor was awesome. So, it's an issue all the way around. I think for all of us, we find in our career endeavors, oh, yeah, that I didn't learn how to do that, or I was never taught how the whole package goes together. Or in my case, and I feel like you know, the lighting switch that you can put on it that's on a dimmer.
Yeah. Mhm.
From the time I started in music to now, that that knob, as I've learned and I've conducted and as I've done things, has gone to bright light fire. Okay, I get it. I'm one of the lucky ones that knows what I don't know and know what I need to do to get it. Yeah. As I
Well,
suspect you are too.
well, I'm taking advantage since I have you here, and this was not on the sheet. But can before you go, can you just say what are 5 or 10 pieces that you feel every person, if they're a choral person,
Oh,
should know and appreciate? So, for example, if I met somebody who's my age and had never heard Bach's Mass in B minor, which I love, I think is a, I mean, I love that piece. I would think to myself, this person probably should have heard that piece, you know?
well, I would go with shorter, more accessible ones. Like I used to get on my methods classes saying to them, write out every classical CD that you have.
Mhm.
And they would come in and maybe have five or none or maybe 15. And I'd say, before you go and teach, here's a list of 100 CDs that you need to start buying because these will be your touchstones when you uh, when you're having problems with tone and you listen to Saint Olaf and you listen to the King Singers, and to get that variety of sound when you're trying to find literature. These are recordings that have octavos, 3 to 4 minute pieces of music. And I would often say to them, okay, you need to know, from the Renaissance, you likely need to know, April is in my mistress' face. You need to know, um, Ave Verum Corpus. You need to know who Tallis is. You need, know those composers because those are the ones the kids are going to get so turned on to that you can't turn them off. I mean, they're just like, we want to go into the stairwell where there's reverberation and sing this from
That
Bach.
that was what did it for me. I mean, I remember that first concert,
Oh,
Ella, the Jesu Dulcis Memoria, which is attributed to Victoria, and we were all spread out on the stage and mixed in formation. We were in our tuxedos, and the girls were in black dresses, and I was just thinking to myself, the lights are on you, and I was like, this is kind of cool.
it is. Yeah, it's way cool. I mean, to this day, I look at my favorites: medieval and Renaissance, 20th century, 20th and 21st century. Not that I dislike Baroque and classical and romantic. It's just, if you've worked these skills on the periphery, you're building those skills to get into. Let's face it. Oh my gosh! If you pull out the Beethoven Hallelujah from the Mount of Olives, and you've got sopranos squealing at a high G for 32 beats, really, 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 really,
It seems to
yeah.
me that
And
as
I remember when we did the Ninth Symphony, and I specifically said, I had all the sopranos. I had 70 sopranos in one room, and I said, those of you with last names that begin A through G, you're going to breathe right here and come right back in and going on through. I said that's the only way we're going to get a seamless
yeah.
that was thing. Um, Gosh, oh, um, the
Here's,
content.
here's the thing, Dr. Johnson, you, I assume when you were running University of Kansas, you have to understand the music that we sang over those 4 years. I guess I stayed 1 year for graduate school, so 5 years. It was excellent. I mean, all of the pieces, all of the, it was, I mean, it was, whoever chose all that music for those 5 years, it was amazing. And I'm assuming that you had to kind of look over your TA's programs, and I would assume that you would have to at least know something about what they're programming.
Yeah.
It was superb what we did. Absolutely
yeah,
superb. Everything. We did Beethoven's Ninth, we did Handel Messiah, we did Morales, we did Guerrero, we did Palestrina. I mean, it was amazing.
you're gonna love this. One of the most cherished conversations I ever had. Um, the chamber choir did Christlag und Todesbanden, Bach, the cantata number 4. Absolutely my favorite. And so we were at First Presbyterian, and the organ was down. So Jeff Waite, or Jeff, that's okay. Jeff, our keyboardist, played on piano. And after it was over, Jim Ralston, who had been the director of choral activities,
Oh, I know who he is. Yeah.
and Daniel Politowski came over. And they said, could we sit down together? And it was the most loving argument for a half hour about you should not have done that piece of music at all if you were having to do a piano. And I was saying, I didn't have an organ here. There is an organ in this church. That's the reason we chose to come here. It is not working. What's the other alternative? And I said, and I rudely would say, before we go out on tour, we would give a dry heave to everything, a dry run, and that Bach, boy, it just needed that concentrated 35 minutes straight. And I love those two men. They really rode herd on me when I was at KU, and they would come to every concert and take copious notes, and they're always right on.
I didn't know Ralston had anything to do with it after he left.
Well, he loved coming back. He loved sitting in on rehearsals. He loved coming to concerts, much like what I'm doing with Eduardo. If Eduardo asked me questions, that's the new director of choral activities. If Eduardo asks me questions, I'll give him answers. But for me to go up on the hill and to sit in on a rehearsal and to get immersed with this glorious sound and all this music. There was one piece they did this year, a Swedish piece, that it was Swedish holler song, where no telephone, you are hollering from one tribe to another. And it was a sacred piece. I couldn't get enough of it.
Wow.
It's like,
Was it in Bales?
like
Performed in Bales?
they did,
Because
but
anything sounds good in there.
yeah. And then they also performed at the state convention, but they also went to an international choral competition in Greece, and they won every single award. And he's doing great work. Huh,
Just
doing
to
really
finish
great.
up though, are you saying that Ralston and Dr. Politovsky, they were trying to tell you that you shouldn't use piano as a continuo?
Yeah.
And when
And
you
I was,
told them that
oh,
you could plan the organ, what did they say?
well, I said, yeah, but let me argue that. Let me argue it. I said, are you telling me that I should have denied 400 people the opportunity to hear that piece of music when it was so gloriously performed? I said, really?
Because Bach was a piano salesman towards the end of his life.
No, I didn't know that.
He
Oh my,
absolutely was.
oh my.
Absolutely was. We learned that in graduate school, and I've had since that time I've had an opportunity to explore it more. He absolutely was. Um, but haven't you noticed that a piece can sound so different whether you use a continual of like a harpsichord versus an organ?
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds so different. How do you
Absolutely.
decide?
Uh,
But of course, the harpsichord is usually so soft, though. It has
yeah,
to have like a microphone, in my
yeah.
opinion.
Oh, I agree.
I don't
I
like it
agree.
when you can't. I don't like it when you can't even tell what the harpsichord is playing.
It when I was on one of the choir tours and we were doing the cantata number 4, and most places we had an organ and we had a string quartet that filled in the parts. So it was lovely. I have such a memory of being in Bruton Chapel at Williamsburg. And we were in the Kreeslag, 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 and Todes Bond. And it was light from candles.
Mm.
And I saw my students do this. And a wad of hot wax, no joke, that big, landed on my bald head and went down the back of my neck.
Are you serious?
And I'm like, I smiled. I said, keep going, keep going. Yeah. And
That's
then,
that hurts though.
yeah. And then when we performed it at the Chamber Hall at Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, a marvelous, marvelous harpsichord. And that was the performance I was so looking forward to. And it was electrifying. I mean, just ugh.
Well,
Yeah.
there is a professor that shall remain nameless, but let's just say he really liked the cello, the Baroque cello, and he was trying to convince us that there's certain evidence that showed that sometimes the continuo was realized by a cello. And I can just say that I'm not convinced.
Yeah.
I'd rather have a harpsichord or an organ.
I'm right with you. I'm right with you. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, people, instrumentalists, as you know, they love their instruments.
Everybody has their thing. Everybody has their ism, you
Yeah.
know, and a lot of times, lucky for me that most people know that when I say really, and I say it right like that, really, I know you don't agree with me. No, I don't. I don't agree with, or, oh, is that so? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So,
fun. That's funny. I appreciate you sharing that story because it's again, it just speaks to how many skills the choir director must have. It's sometimes I wonder, it's almost as if you don't even need to know anything about music at all. It's all diplomacy and bureaucracy and as if you hadn't done enough, then after the concert you have to have the people arguing with you about the continuo instrument.
oh, but that's typical Lawrence. I mean, it's hard to get a standing ovation in Lawrence. It really is. And almost every audience that I ever performed for was very culturally elite. And I love that. I love that.
What a beautiful town though, when the leaves change colors.
Yeah. Yeah. You're gonna love it when you come up. Everything is just that shade of green right now. That's just lovely. And the grass is thick and gorgeous.
And wouldn't you agree, a very great music library?
Yeah. Yeah.
At least
Definitely.
at a time.
Yes.
Once upon a time, it did. I mean, it was great, and of course,
Yeah.
there's never any parking, so
Well,
I always had to go park on the football field. But at the end of each semester, when that great feeling when you finally took all your exams and your juries, you'd walk back all over the hill. It was a magical time. I mean,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
was, and I appreciate you teaching us and keeping us excited about music. And I mean, it was a big deal. It was life or death. I mean, those Vespers that we'd stay there for 3 days, you'd have us sit there for 3 days on the stage, no
Did
bathroom
you ever
break.
notice, Jeff, did you ever notice that when we did the teaching evaluations for Vespers, it was at the very first rehearsal?
Oh, I
And
see.
then I would say to everybody, okay, you're done with evaluations. Now I'm going to treat you like a Pez dispenser. We have a very short amount of time. We're going to jam everything in, close you up, and you're going to spit it out in performance. And that took the amount of hours
Well,
that the grad students and I spent.
you kept saying, you people really need to control your mouths. Remember that? Because we're just sitting there for 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of the people that I sang next to were just like incredible singers. I don't know where they came from, but like even if you didn't know your music, it didn't matter because you had like these guys next to you that were just incredible
Yes.
tenor
Yes.
tenor voices. I don't know where they came from. I mean, I kind of knew my music, but it didn't. I mean, there were just a lot of. It was a great experience.
Truly was. Truly was. And it is again. Yeah. it's very exciting to Vespers this year. I, I I can't even describe it. It was the most glorious hour and a half I have had experiencing music in a very long time. Yeah, and you would have loved it. Um, the top choir did Duraflay Requiem, including all of the chants and all that kind of stuff. And Higdon played. It was it it was marvelous, just marvelous. Yeah.
There's something about those Duraflay chords,
Oh,
you know.
yeah.
But he
It,
too bad he only wrote four pieces.
and I had that issue at Carnegie Hall.
Mhm.
The next time I was invited back to conduct the Duraflay Requiem. Oh, I just loved it. Just loved it.
He
Yeah.
made sure they had the correct scores.
Well, they were always very careful with me after that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
And
uh,
didn't I mean I didn't get mad at anybody. And when the performance was over, I stood off stage, and a as every singer every singer came by, I shook their hand and I said, "Thank you. That was a difficult job. You did a great job." And I really believe that because it yes, I worked hard, but the students worked incredibly hard to pull it off. Yeah.
then of course you have some of these almost freaks. I mean, Vladimir Horowitz, when he was in Carnegie Hall, they had what was called the big blackout, where the whole
Yeah.
city just lost power, and he still kept. There's a recording of the concert. He didn't miss a beat, even though there was complete blackness, you know. And then you have people like Glenn Gould, Richter, Giza King, Rachmaninoff, Hoffman, who could
Yeah.
I mean, stuff they hadn't even thought about in 30 years, you know.
Yeah.
It's it's
That's a
remarkable.
gift if you can do that.
But
Yeah.
then at the same time they were also pretty disturbed people. I mean, Sviatoslav Richter, who probably had more music memorized than anyone. He had 50 concert programs plus his chamber music plus all his concertos, but he also couldn't function in life unless he carried around a little stuffed lobster with him.
Huh, I didn't know that.
And he wouldn't fly, so he had to, that which is kind of difficult, but I mean the same thing with Glenn Gould. He wouldn't talk on the phone if somebody was sick because he thought that you could get
Oh my.
sick over the phone. So, but I mean, a tremendous what an artist. What an artist.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but well, on that happy note, thank you so much for everything. And
It's a world to me that you asked me to do this. Thank you.
I'm hoping this can be kind of the beginning of, now that I got this Zoom running, um, that we can interview some people, because I'm excited just talking to you. I want to go out there and teach a whole bunch more music, and you know, um, I don't know. It just seems like that excitement is what's needed. I cannot imagine teaching music if you're not like on fire for it.
Ah, I agree. I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
God bless you and pray for us, okay?
All right.